bloggers make a lot of money. Okay, what they bring on the table? They bring so many views. They bring so much on the table.
And if it, as they say, if it makes dollars, it makes sense. I know Dana and the UFC are not really into it, but I'm not so against it.
He's just calling everybody out. That way he gets the clout for it, he gets the recognition, he gets everybody saying, wow, he's looking for tough challenges, but then he doesn't actually accept.
We've got this Mickey Mouse Clubhouse kid, that's this Disney kid over there that's fighting, that's kind of picking off, just guys that aren't necessarily fighters, and he's starting to think that he's a fighter, and that's just kind of like the stage that we're in now.
Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson was insane, and some say it was well scripted. This is a fight that once again pushes the message that clout, money, and influence is valued above everything else in our society. And while it's going to be fun to watch the fight, the fact that it's even taking place can tell us a lot about where society is headed. If you were to have told somebody 50 years ago about this situation, it would just seem laughable, absurd, and downright stupid. But now it's becoming increasingly acceptable that any influencer with enough followers can become the face of boxing. Taking down older men from their former glory and using their reputation to force your brand into the public consciousness. Boxing is meant to be a test of strength and durability, a display of discipline and dedication. Now, most amateurs in boxing have to claw their way to the top. They spend years honing their skills before they're even given a shot at recognition. Much less the big leagues. Paul, in contrast with clout and influence, has essentially paid his way to fight in the big leagues. And if you have enough money and clout, it seems like in our society today, you can almost do anything now. No matter where it's fair, just or not. All of his opponents seem to be older, retired fighters in financially difficult spots. That, or they weren't even boxers. Take his fight with Ben Askren, for example. In his prime, Askren was an incredible fighter. So good, in fact, that he represented the US at the 2008 Olympics. Jake Paul's decision to take on a former Olympic athlete was impressive, almost brave. However, this loses all meaning when you start to realize that Askren is a wrestler and not a boxer. He was fighting the worst striker in the UFC history. Before we go further, let's deep down into Jake's boxing highlights. How did a Disney and YouTube star become a star in the fight game? Jake's journey into the boxing scene started from the famous call-out by KSI after his win against Joe Weller in the ring on 2018. KSI called out Jake and Logan Paul, and literally any of the Pauls to fight him in the ring for his next match. Logan took up the fight with KSI on August 5th, 2018, where Jake also debuted in the amateur boxing scene by fighting JJ's younger brother, Deji. As both Jake and Deji were new to the ring, Jake had a slight upper hand as he was a wrestler in high school. However, Deji proved to be a worthy component and actually busted Jake's nose in the fight, leaving him bloody. Unfortunately for Deji, Jake came out as the victor, which was the fuel he needed to keep the flame going. Jake's next fight came a couple years later in 2020, and it was his debut as a professional boxer against the seven-figure Gibber. However, this was the first time Jake shocked the crowd as he finished Gibb via a first-round knockout. Unfortunately for Jake, he wasn't really able to prove much of his skill, as it was a quick fight. About a year later, Jake would be facing Nate Robinson for his second pro match as part of the undercard for the Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. exhibition match. Jake won the fight with a KO during the second round, and it was a brutal one. Robinson face-planted onto the canvas and was out cold immediately. After his insane knockout against Nate, Jake Paul went on to fight retired UFC welterweight champ Ben Askren. Although this bout did take a while before it happened, Ben eventually accepted Jake's challenge, and the fight was set in April 2021. In true Jake Paul style, he delivered a knockout in barely a minute, bringing Ben down just in the first round of the fight. Everything changed with his bout with former UFC welterweight champion Tyron Woodley. Regardless of the fact that Jake didn't score a knockout, this win was big for him. Tyron put up a good fight for Jake, and he was able to show off what he's been learning in the past few years, that he is actually a good boxer despite being a YouTuber. At the end, it was a split decision for Jake, but this wasn't the end of the Jake Paul-Tyron Woodley saga. They fought once again after Tommy Fury pulled out of his fight with Jake, and Woodley replaced Fury at the last minute. It was during this fight that Jake Paul's exceptional boxing talent was on full display as he defeated Woodley and shut the ex-UFC championship's lights out via a massive knockout in round 6. In 2022 was Paul's latest and arguably his biggest to date, going up against UFC legend Anderson Silva. As someone who has experience in boxing, he proved to be one of Jake's toughest opponents, if not the toughest. However, Jake secured yet another win over the legend. He thrashed Silva in Arizona, even scoring a knockout in the 8th and final round. In the end, Jake defeated Silva via unanimous decision. This win against Silva was a great boost for Jake's record to 6-0. And then he challenged Tommy Fury. Fury is the only pro boxer Paul has actually dared to fight, and it's obvious why. Having grown used to the slower pace of former opponents, Paul wasn't ready for Fury's rapid-fire hits. And unsurprisingly, Fury won. And those who doubted the influencer's skills felt justified. Now most people couldn't ignore Jake again. For the average person, he slipped back into oblivion. Then he needed to challenge one of the most iconic fighters in the world. A fighter who was once so dangerous, Jake's life would have been in danger had he fought him in his prime, Mike Tyson. There's one thing that you can't deny about Jake Paul: he's confident. Few people can challenge Iron Mike to a fight and come out the other side unscathed, even at his age. Many who faced the boxer in the ring got their backsides handed to them. One even lost part of his ear. So when Jake issued his challenge, fans' responses ranged from outrage to excitement. But the real elephant in the room here is that Tyson is obviously 3 decades older than the influencer. He made a name for himself in the boxing world before Paul was even born. The only reason he stopped was because he couldn't do it anymore. During his time in the ring, Paul seems to be running on pure ego in the build-up to this fight. If you listen to any of his interviews, it's evident that he's on an unearned power trip. Sure, he's spoken about how honored he is that Tyson agreed to fight him, but he's also regularly declared that he's fighting Tyson and no one else. It puts the boxer in an awkward position. And finally, Tyson versus Jake fight happened. And you all know the outcome. Jake Paul defeated Mike Tyson via unanimous decision. And over 50 million people watched it through Netflix. This fight has many controversies. It was too slow, and Mike only threw around 70 punches during the whole fight. Well, actually, it sucked in my opinion. Anyway, Jake won. But the next question is, what's next for Jake Paul? There are many in line for Jake Paul: Ryan Garcia, Conor McGregor, and Artur Beterbiev. Will Jake Paul accept these fights? Artur also made an announcement that he is ready to take down Paul, but there's no positive feedback from Paul yet. And same with Ryan Garcia. Looks like Jake is scared of these real young boxers. Or will Paul reject these offers and continue to go after old men? Only Jake knows who and what's next for him.